It was a female producer. There was an incident with a star who was abusive to young women, production assistants. There'd been a recent incident. I was moved on to a particular show because another young woman had been moved off. And a female producer said to me, "Look, I'm going to tell you a fact of life. In this situation, there's one loser, and it's not him. So you got to figure out how to navigate this." That's a horrible thing to say. To be honest, it's the truth. And it's the truth in all kinds of power situations. When there's an imbalance of power, there's one loser and it ain't the person in power. You got to decide what you're going to do. That's just true.
In a corporate world where all employees have great leaders with no egos that create fun cultures where people can do their best work, the employees and companies thrive while doing great things for the customers, themselves, and each other.
Well, we know that rarely happens. I'm Jeff Palacio. I have been a leader for over 40 years for every t-shirt size company, from small 16 employees to extra large over 1 million. Please join me while I interview outstanding leaders that will share stories of great leadership and not so great. It will help you become a better leader while poking fun about all the crazy shit that happens in corporate America.
Hi, I'm Joe Deshawn, and welcome to the Corporate Couch with Jeff Palacio. Today's episode is brought to you by ExecHQ, a C-suite fractional firm providing elite executives for your business. Today, Jeff is interviewing Anna Murray. Anna is a technical entrepreneur and founder of emedia LLC, a provider of software development, high-level technology consulting, and project and program management. She has consulted with brands worldwide on their digital strategies, served as interim CIO for Time Out New York, and has been head of interactive at Harvard Business Publishing. She has also led digital transformation at the American Association of Advertising Agencies, and is the author of several books, including The Complete Software Project Manager. You can learn more about Anna at emediaweb.com. Let's listen as Jeff talks to Anna.
Anna, welcome to the Corporate Couch this morning.
I'm delighted to be here, Jeff.
Yes, I am delighted to have you. I'm honored. You have such a fascinating career, and you have a legacy to your great-grandfather was called the inventor that powered New York City. So I'm sure we're going to talk about your great-grandfather a little bit too. But we were introduced by Heidi Lehman, who we're recording here on September 27th, 2024, and publishing Heidi's episode next week. Just honored to have you, and you've written books. What I love, you've written not only the Complete Software Project Manager book, but then you write a novel. So it's a little yin yang. I love it, and you just have a fascinating career, and we're gonna chat about it. But let's talk about a fun question at the start. Even if people know you fairly well, Anna, what one thing would surprise them about you?
I think people are always surprised to learn that I am an avid knitter. Like socks and sweaters and hats, and because I think that folks' impression of me, rightfully so, that's their impression of me, right? Is I'm on an airplane and I got my roller bag and I got my cell phone, and then this sort of knitting thing feels very, crafty, grandma-y, and so people are very startled by that. I was at a speaking engagement and I brought my knitting on stage. It was a cybersecurity conference. I was leading a panel of women, and I used the knitting as kind of a talking stick. And it was interesting because the idea was, first of all, people were sort of shocked. I mean, people don't even know. It's like if I brought, I don't know, a butter churn on stage or something, like really out of like Little House on the Prairie or something. And it was bright orange. And but the point really was that this was a digital conference. It's about cybersecurity, digital world. The point really was that there are some things that are absolutely not digitable, absolutely not AI-able, and knitting is one of them.
Right. I love that. So where did you grow up? And what did you love doing as a kid?
So I grew up mostly in the New York area, though around a bit, a little. I was a dweeby, nerdy kind of kid. I loved to read, loved to read. I loved nature. Horseback riding was my sport. I was on the back of a horse from age 3 and 3.5, which I'm not sure it would even be legal these days.
Right. Your parents would have been arrested today.
Absolutely. But I was really just an avid reader. I look back on my time as a kid and just think of, summers sitting under a tree with a book, that was my jam.
Right. And what were kind of, you have a specific genre that you loved?
I'm a historical and Victorianist. If it was anything written from, 1800 on, that's me. I just loved anything that I could get my hands on that was Victorian.
So growing up, did you have aspirations when you became an adult? I'm going to be this. What was it for you?
From when I was a tiny little kid, I wanted to be a writer. And if I could have been, and novels, sometimes the particular form of art strikes a person as just the pinnacle of achievement. That could be for a musician, it could be to be a jazz musician. For a theater person, it could be to perform on Broadway. It could be dancing for Martha Graham. Just all of these things that a person could have as sort of the pinnacle of achievement. And for me, that meant the ability to write a full-length novel. I couldn't when I was exposed to, and I'm that girl who's like Pride and Prejudice and North and South and the whole Little House on the Prairie series and
Right.
all of Anne of Green Gables. The idea that you could have a novel that hung together from page 1 to page 250, which just seemed like we were like writing paragraphs in school. That was enough. Not never mind write a series. It's
Right.
just like such an enormous achievement, and the story and the character. That to me, somebody else, again, it might be the New York Ballet, somebody else, it might be, to write an opera. For me, that was the pinnacle of, boy, I'd like to do that someday.
You're one of the few guests that I think achieved their childhood dream. So you have published a novel, at least one. Yeah, so that's fascinating. I myself wanted to be an NFL quarterback, and that did not happen. But there you go.
That's a little bit more time limited.
Yeah, that's right. I can't.
And what's interesting to circle back to horseback riding, it is the only Olympic sport where men and women compete on absolutely equal terms.
Okay, yeah.
Right? Men and women ride horses on teams, and it is at the moment the most age agnostic of medalists in the last Olympics was 55 years old.
Wow. Yeah.
So I'm thinking maybe you picked the wrong sport. You need a longer timeline.
Exactly.
Right? You need a runway.
There's still pickleball, maybe. There you go. So you went to Yale and you you graduated with a BA in English. So obviously you kind of took that childhood passion and said, "I'm going to be an English major and go to Yale." And so that was your kind of thought process at the time.
I'm going to say, like most young people, the thought process was rather limited. Like many young people, I do understand that these days, like going to college involves consultants and all kinds of stuff. But in those days, I was a nerdy, high achieving, and I was at Catholic girls' school. So that was what I was doing. And I thought, oh, I know what I'll do. I'm a nerdy, high achieving young woman. I'm going to go to Yale, and I did. I got in, and I had no idea what I was tackling. First of all, Yale, this was 1984, just full disclosure, of the decade that we're talking about. Yale only went co-ed in 1969, which meant its first graduating class that included women, and for women was in the early 70s. So I was going like a decade after that. So
Yeah, wow.
the school was still in a transition from what had been an all-male school for, literally centuries to a co-ed school. And so there was not only that, but there was also, I was just like, okay, I'll go to Yale. Sure, fine, that's fine. I got a high SAT score. This will be fine. And I had no idea what it would be like to tackle a major world-renowned university that was highly competitive at a level I had no experience with. And it was kind of, it was kind of bumpy. It was like, I don't know, it's just, I graduated out of 45 girls,
Wow.
and then I was taking on this huge thing. So not only was the school going through an adjustment, I was going through an adjustment.
Yeah.
And also what I discovered was, I'm going to be an English major. That'll be fun. We're going to read books. So Yale was super serious,
Yeah.
serious as a heart attack. And like, in order to be an English major, you had to, it was like studying the origins of the English language. So you had to read Beowulf in Old English,
Wow.
which, if you don't know what Old English looks like, neither do I, because different alphabets.
Right.
It is a Germanic language. Like, this is hell, right?
Right.
For a 20-year-old to sort of, who thinks that she's going to be reading more Pride and Prejudice, right? So
Right.
Yale was a rude awakening in more than one way, but obviously, when confronted with challenges and academic challenges like that, that's character forming as well as
Right.
intelligence forming.
Sure. Yeah, it's fascinating. Did you ever think of changing your major from freshman to senior year, or you just stuck it out?
No,
Yeah, I love it.
no. I mean, to me, it was part of my identity. Like, if I didn't know what being an English major was about, that was on me,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So I felt like, well, if there's stuff that I need to learn, and this is what being a writer is about, I'm gonna learn it.
Right.
And I did.
Yeah. So you graduate from Yale. You have your BA in English. Looked like you did something for about 2 years before you enrolled in. You went to Columbia for your Master's of Science in Journalism. What did you do in that period of time?
So I got out of school and I became a school teacher. A lot of my peers at the time, in the late 80s, were going to Wall Street. And it turned out that I really wasn't clear how to pursue what I wanted to do, which was in information and communications. I mean, of course, I said that, my passion was to write novels, but I was also aware that, like, one doesn't make a living that way. And I needed a job. So I hadn't actually gotten clear on what that meant in terms of what I was talented at and my passions, but I actually thought I could be a very good school teacher, and I was. So I taught school for a couple of years, and I still look back on that time. I love teaching. It's an extremely rewarding career. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, and I've done some really hard things, like starting up my own business, running it through various recessions. Teaching was the hardest thing I ever did, but I learned so much. Nothing ever taught me how to run a meeting better than teaching ninth grade English.
I bet. Yeah.
You can control a ninth grade classroom. You can run any meeting on the face of the planet. So yeah, so I enjoyed teaching for a while, and then I decided, I was ambitious, and teaching has its own trajectory, and that didn't, match very well with, I'm going to say, my ideas of ambition at that time.
So you're thinking now I'm going to be a journalist. So you enroll, you get accepted at Columbia University, and say, hey, I get my Master's of Science, and I'll become the next. I don't even know if the women anchor.
Diane Sawyer, I guess, at the
Yeah, well,
time.
I was going to say,
Barbara Wells.
yeah, okay, yeah,
So degree in journalism just felt to me like a way so my degree in journalism opened up so many avenues of things that I didn't think about and still look back on, which goes to the point, and I know, we're talking about sort of career couch kind of topics. It goes to the point of planning is a fool's errand.
right. There you go.
Planning in too much detail is a fool's errand. One has
Yeah,
to be open to,
yeah,
the world or the universe or whatever you believe in puts in front of you.
right,
So I thought my plan was, okay, I love writing communication. I'm going to get a degree in journalism. Journalism is a way to make money in writing communication, while alongside I perhaps pursue a career as a novelist. So the unintended consequences of that were that I had no idea the degree to which a journalism degree was, first of all, writing boot camp at a level that I have never had before. I had taught AP English, and I had people correcting my grammar all over the place with red pen. Like, I felt like a first grader again. So that, like, writing boot camp, but also it was a highly technical degree at the time. So we were forced to compose on a keyboard, which was utter. I mean, think back to the 90s. If you were using a computer, which you might not even have been doing, the word
Right.
processing, right? You were writing longhand and then going to the computer. This was a transition phase. I didn't know anybody who would sit down on a computer and type. It seems like second nature to all of us. We compose on screen. That was new. But added to that was the fact that we weren't working on the modern Macintosh or Microsoft Word, such things sort of, I mean, I know the Mac came out in 1984, but whatever. This was still,
Right.
virgin territory. And in writing, you were writing on a black screen at a DOS prompt where all of the formatting, the paragraphing, whatever, had to be done through commands and keystrokes.
Right.
So you're composing on screen for the first time ever on a keyboard, and you're learning little bits of, I mean, I guess we'd call it markup. It felt like programming, like I have to program my article.
Right.
Oh. And then not to mention the fact that we were required, I mean, this was an early multimedia degree is what it was. We had to learn the disciplines, right? We were learning reporting and writing, interviewing techniques, all this kind of stuff. We had to take a course in radio, which was required. You had to take a course in radio, and radio at the time was you were learning to you literally spliced the radio tape using a physical razor blade. But that was transitioning to the screen as well. So we were learning the both, and we were learning video editing on screen. So one came out of Columbia at the time with multimedia. At the time we would have called multimedia and sort of power user digital skills, producer skills that 97% of the population didn't have.
Wow. Yeah, fascinating. So you graduate from Columbia, and it looked like about a 5-year period before you founded your company, emedia, which is still going strong today. But so what kind of did you do a toe dip into the journalism world? What was your journey then?
I did. I worked for some newspapers. I worked for a bunch of newspapers. And then I worked for ABC News for a while. What I discovered was that I did not want to pursue a career in pure journalism. And I think the lesson there is, again, I think plans are overrated. And I think that it's important to be able to be flexible and shift. And to not, especially when I would never want to go back and relive my 20s. It's such a hard time. You take everything so seriously. But the ability to say, how do you know until you know? How do you know until you've done something? When you're in school, it's all very theoretical. You may be lucky enough as a kid to have a parent in an industry where you can be an intern or whatever. But if you're not pursuing an industry where you have, let's say, a close relative or a parent who really can give you the lowdown, you're experiencing it for the first time.
Right.
The thing about journalism is that writing was a part of it, but not as big a part as I might have preferred. And that it was a tough career. It was a tough career where you didn't go home for Thanksgiving, because you worked over Thanksgiving because it's 24/7. CNN was relatively new at the time, and a lot of the networks, including the network I was working for, were starting overnight broadcasts. So you were working night shifts. There was a lot of lifestyle things where I was like, well, wait. And then in order to succeed in the news business, you had to do things that were way beyond my risk envelope at the time, like go to Bosnia and report on the war there.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And I had barely been to Europe, never mind like reporting in a war zone.
Right.
And this, we're talking from a perspective of a person. I'm not risk averse. It was just too much.
Right.
And it was also too much for something that I enjoyed and I appreciated, but was not my life's work.
Right.
You pretty quickly determine if something is the hill you're going to die on.
Right.
And it turned out I was not passionate enough about news and news media reporting, getting information out like that. That was not it for me. So that was the end of that. What happened was very soon after that, I moved to Michigan because I had a personal reason to do so. And that kicked off the founding of my new company. I went into multimedia proper and started my own company.
I'm interested because, you're a young female journalist, and, this was a time when there weren't a lot of probably female journalists. Do you think you were treated differently
Yeah, so that was another kind of underbelly of this whole thing. Again, sort of picking the things that you're really willing to sacrifice for. I mean, it's an open secret nowadays, the Me Too movement, about how young production assistants were treated in the big network news world. And for sure that happened to me and people that I knew. And, I remember it was a female producer, and there was an incident with a star who was abusive to young women production assistants. There'd been a recent incident. I was moved on to a particular show because another young woman had been moved off. And a female producer said to me, "Look, I'm going to tell you a fact of life. In this situation, there's one loser, and it's not him. So you got to figure out how to navigate this."
Right.
Now, that's a horrible thing to say. It probably would be all kinds of actionable, in 2024. Probably happens a fair, one would hope, a fair amount less in 2024. But, to be honest, it's the truth,
Yeah.
and it's the truth in all kinds of power situations. When there's an imbalance of power, there's one loser and it ain't the person in power.
Right.
So you got to decide what you're going to do.
Right.
That's just true. And my choices took me away from that. I often think back, and as I've admitted, like pursuing news and certainly broadcast news was not the passion of my life. I arrived at pretty quickly, it wasn't as if I had been admitted to a dance troupe and it was my passion to dance for the New York City Ballet, and I had achieved that pinnacle. That wasn't where I was in my head. It wasn't where I was at. So, but what if I had been there? What if this had been the passion of my life, which is, I think, how so many of these horrible stories
Right.
unfold, right?
Right.
Where it's like, oh my gosh, I've landed the pinnacle of what I hoped to achieve. And now I'm confronted with this reality, and I'm being told another truth for reality, which is there's one loser, and it's you, it's not the person in power. So you got to figure out your path to navigate this, which in some ways is an impossible ask,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Be up, be down at the same time, be accommodating, but draw the line. All of these things. I took myself out of the mix in that particular case.
Well, I'm sorry you had to go through that. I mean, that's yeah. So I'm fascinated by, I know you got some experience kind of in the tech world when you got your master's in Columbia in journalism. But I mean, most tech founders, you're like an English person, journalism. Most tech founders, they've had like math and, masters in mathematics or statistics or whatever. So talk about your journey to find, when you created emedia in 1996, and I think it's the longest running women-owned web and digital transformation agency in the U.S. So that's really cool. So yeah, talk about the creation of your company.
I often say that I founded my company by accident, which is, again, plans, not so useful.
Right.
Um, I had no barrier to getting into. So when I left journalism at the time, CD-ROMs were on the cover of Time magazine. Nobody had heard of I mean, of course, the internet existed, but it was not something that one talked about a lot. So I had enough multimedia skills from my recent journalism experience, to feel pretty confident running the software team of a multimedia producer that made educational games, right? There was scripting, there was music, there was editing on screen, there was clicking. I mean, what was new to me was this clicking and various outcomes, sort of the decision tree of software. That was my first introduction to it. But the other stuff felt like a relatively easy transition. And that's another benefit of a journal. I often hire journalists, and I love hiring journalists either on my team or as contract workers, because there's a certain perspective, which is like you can tackle anything. If your editor gives you an assignment to cover the nuclear power plant, your response to that editor is not, "Oh, I don't know anything about nuclear power," because the answer to that is, you're going to freaking find out, and you're going to learn enough to be able to write that article, and then you're going to turn in that article on time. So off you go, right?
Right. Yeah.
The answer is not, I don't know about the political situation in Russia, or I don't know about how the economics of logistics works from China to the port of Los Angeles. You figure it out and you report on it. So that was a kind of a mindset, like, okay, multimedia. It's got a lot of things I know about, some things I don't know about, but I have this training, off we go. So I was working for a company that did multimedia games and had a few big sellers at the time. And then the programming team that I managed as a project manager was talking about the internet. And I learned through them about the internet. And the head of the companies, his perspective was, yeah, this internet thing, I don't think it's going anywhere.
There you go.
So this had the engineering team, I mean, up in, there are many, many things that have been like, I mean, I fault this particular person for lack of vision, but how many opportunities has any one of us missed? Bitcoin,
Right.
AI, feel like you hear about it 10 years after it took off, the iPhone, like, MP3 players, iPod, MP3 players have been around for years. The iPod's never, oh, look, right? So
Right.
a lot of us make these mistakes. I left for the programming team and started an early stage internet company. We still did some commercial multimedia games for promotional purposes, but then I ended up building some of the national brands' first websites. This is before agencies took it over. This was where people would come up to you and go, "Can you build a website?"
Yeah.
And to be honest, it was so much simple. You asked a question before, like, how could I do this as an English major? And I gave you a flim flam answer, like, well, I could do multimedia. But truly, the internet at the time was very simple. And it was simpler than editing video on screen. It was simpler than educational software because it was click display, click display, click
Right.
display. So I was one of these, I mean, there was a lot you had to understand, way more than now, about the pipes and the infrastructure and the modems and how to connect, and working with clients, like, okay, to see your sample site, you are going to type back up, HTT, no, not PT.
Right.
I mean, it was unbelievable. It was like watching paint dry.
Yes.
So there was a lot of stuff that you had to master, but the technology was the least of it.
Right.
And then I was one of those fortunate people who was running a web company so early on that I got on the job training effectively at every step of the way.
Yeah.
That the internet did not do database at the time. What's a database? I don't know. Not going to worry about it. Can't do it. Not my business. Okay, now the internet is drawing on databases. What is it? What is a relational database? How does that work? How do I hire for it? What is it? So I really grew up with on-the-job training, and now engage with people. Think I am an engineer, and I guess in some ways I really am, because I can have a dialogue with an engineer about what is the better solution,
Right.
and really have a debate, a legitimate debate, because I do have the experience.
It's so interesting, Anna, too, because I was I was an employee 55 with Sprint PCS when it was owned
Wow.
by Sprint, TCI, Comcast, and Cox Cable owned the other. Sprint owned 40%, and the other three owned the 60%. And I remember one of my colleagues worked at American Express, and then he came over to work for us, and we were doing some due diligence on somebody to build our websites, and we flew in from Kansas City to New York City, and he got this, referral from his buddy at Amex. I don't even know where it was in New York City because it's too long ago, but it was not like an office building. It was and the person, it was supposed to be an 8:30 meeting. We were waiting outside, like literally on the street. And they finally came, at 8:45 or whatever. We go in. He goes, "I'm going to make some coffee. Just sit in this conference room." I look around, and so American Express was using this web agency. I look around. There's all these porn site pictures, and I'm like, I wonder if American Express knows. But that was like, the original. I forget the movie. There's a movie. I think not Luke Wilson, Owen Wilson's brother was in. It's a true story about how this guy got into, developing porn. I don't know, but anyhow, yeah. So it was a time of, yeah. It
The
wasn't the big.
Wild West. It
Yeah,
was the Wild West.
it really was.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Exec HQ, a C-suite fractional firm providing elite executives for your business. If you're having challenges taking your business to the next level, if you want to augment your leadership team, or prepare your company for increased growth, profitability, and an eventual successful exit, we have seasoned executives from every C-suite position ensuring a perfect fit for your needs and the dynamics of your industry. You will work with senior leaders who like to roll up their sleeves while checking their egos at the door. They can help your business in specific services such as strategic planning, executive leadership coaching, financial management, corporate governance, marketing, sales management, and many other advisory solutions vital to your business success. That's exechq.com. To learn more, go to exechq.com or email Jeff Palacio at jeff.palacio@exechq.com.
It turned out that I was well suited to be a founder, to run my own company. I didn't like working for people. It's one of the reasons teaching worked for me, because I was, you're effectively an independent agent in charge of your own domain. And when I was, all the frustrations that people feel about being employees, which is the strategy is out of your control. Somebody's forcing you to spend a lot of time, which is your life energy, doing something that seemingly has no purpose or has a purpose that you disagree with. I mean, all of these things, I understood very early on that it was a high risk, situation to be in. It's high risk, like you got to make payroll. It's relentless. You got to make payroll, and the customer doesn't pay on time. Half the time the customer doesn't pay on time because, Ted in accounting is having knee surgery. The real reasons that businesses go awry is not, like aliens land or recession hits or whatever. It's Ted is having knee surgery.
Right.
And 6 figures of invoices are stuck in processing because Ted is having knee surgery and I got to make payroll on Friday. Like this
Right.
is the reality of running business.
Right. Yeah.
Right? It's just true. It's ridiculous,
Yeah.
but it's the human nature of running business. So nothing has ever kept me up at night. And that just for me, that just comes with the operating system, right? I mean, I don't stress about things. I figure it'll all work out or whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't, if something is out of my control, I generally, you do the key to sort of, I was about to say mental health, and maybe it is mental health. So I'll just say mental health. The key to mental health is you can only control so much. Be diligent about what you can control. A lot of programming, a lot of running any kind of firm, but certainly a technical firm, is you got to field the rocks. You got to turn over all the rocks to figure out what the solution is, or to get through to whatever objective you want. So you got to turn over all the rocks. That little stone, yes, that little stone, turn it over. What's under it? Document it all, figure it out. And then when you're done with that, with the what you can control, the diligence, the discipline, the what are we missing, the what is it on me to do, then you got to let it go. Right? So Ted's having knee surgery. You don't know if you're going to make payroll. You make every phone call you can. You figure out if there's a plan B, how difficult the plan B is. You put all of that into place, and then you go to sleep because you have done what you are going to do. And P.S., we're still not doing heart surgery. Most of us are still don't have a patient on the table who's going to die if we make a mistake. Right? Perspective.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's so interesting. So, what was it like? I don't know if you had a physical, when COVID hit, you're in New York City, and I don't know if you had a physical presence where people came to work, but what was that like running your company during the pandemic?
I started my company way back in 96 as a virtual company. And that was because the key fellas, and at the time it was fellas that I employed, and that I want it. So quality of employee, partner, employee, colleague, whatever you want to say, was absolutely tippy top, because you're at the you're at the dawn of an industry. And P.S., by the way, people were telling me at the time that the web, all the web agencies that were going to be started had been started, and 96 was way too late to start a web agency, which just teaches you not to listen to the BS, right? Because
Right.
everybody's going to talk you down, everybody's going to be negative, everybody has a reason why not. I always say if I'd listened to my accountants and my attorneys over the years, I never would have done anything. So I'm starting this web company, and what becomes immediately evident is that talent, the people who could do this, was going to be tough. So wherever you are, and then these individuals know what a modem is. They know what the early instant messenger platform. The people knew how to. The early talented people in web technologies knew how to collaborate remotely. So you're going to keep costs low. I mean, I'm not saying it was easy, because it wasn't. You remember, like, you dial up and it's like, do we and all of
Yeah.
this, every day, four times a day, if you lost your connection, right? So we were all doing this, but it made sense. We were all remote. We didn't have to have an office, and we can operate an agency. So scrolling forward to your question, I did have an office. I never particularly adapted well to office culture, because I'm full disclosure, couple of the people who joined me in the late 90s are still on my team.
Wow.
So we were a remote culture to start with.
Right.
Which meant that I attracted people who were comfortable with that. I was comfortable with that. Everybody had the work. You didn't have this kind of, wait a minute, I have to readjust my life. So for us, the adjustment was nothing. I mean, we were just like Back to the Future. Okay, whatever. And I don't have to listen to the modem hissing at me.
Right. Yeah, that's so interesting, because in 1991, I had started this group at Sprint. We built the first customer marketing database for Sprint, and there were no like data scientists, business analysts. So I was just getting smart IT programmers that could figure out and be business oriented to solve business problems, which wasn't the norm in IT at that time. But I remember in 91, Sprint did not have an work at home policy, but I would have, there was one programmer, Dave Ramirez. Dave was fantastic, but he was like a single dad. He had just gotten divorced, and his daughter was sick. He goes, "Hey, you think I can work at home? Because I can dial in." I think it was VMS, virtual machine, blah, blah,
Right.
blah, VM. You dial in. I go, "Sure, why not? Like, you can code from there, or you can sit at that desk across from me. I don't care." So I had them work at home. I had people work at home, because I'm like, you can,
Yes.
yeah.
I mean, it's a mindset. I always joke that I'm a control freak, which that may be wrong. I mean, I do like to know what's going on, but at the same time, I feel like that the need to control people by physically being next to them, or physically being able to see them, that that feels off to me. It feels off in a way that it's got almost a sinister tinge to it. You know, that it's almost like I get like a razor ribbon vision in my, like,
Right.
you cannot control human beings, right? Especially in a ninth grade classroom, you cannot control human beings, and yet we constantly want to do that,
Right.
constantly.
Yeah.
And we could learn a lot from the animal world. My team knows that I'm just absolutely relentless with the horse metaphors, right? Because I'm a horseback rider, and
Right.
it teaches one a certain kind of discipline,
Right.
for one thing. Like many sports do, they teach a certain discipline. And one of the things that one learns in any kind of equestrian sport, I'm sure people who are zookeepers know this as well. When you're dealing with an animal that is 1,000 pounds, you are not going to physically control this animal, male or female. I don't care how big you are, unless you're the Incredible Hulk, you are not controlling this animal through a physical means, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now what are you going to do? Well, we know that there are methods and means, because we have been riding horses, and horses help to build civilization for literally millennia. So human beings have worked out a way to, but it has more to do with attitude and self-discipline than it does with physical control. And that is a discipline that many leaders, like, I often think like a great leadership seminar would be at a dude ranch.
Yeah.
Right? Because the other interesting thing about animals is that they interpret, and this we are animals, by the way. We are part of the animal world. Animals who are not humans interpret frustration, anger, fist pounding, losing your you know what as weakness. Frustration and fist pounding to an animal are weakness. So when you see someone on the street trying to manage their dog and they're like, Fifi, stop it. Fifi, you're so bad. What Fifi is hearing is, wow, she has lost her crap. And this is very concerning to me because I'm a Chihuahua and now I'm the entity that has her act most together. Like this is the way the animal interprets this. Like,
Right.
you are no longer in control. You are no longer someone I respect. You are no longer someone I can trust. And now it's up to me. And I'm a Chihuahua, right? And in a meeting, in a situation where you have various people, it is the same thing. You can get far enough fist pounding because people will be intimidated or whatever, but they are not going to respect you and they are not going to follow you as a leader. That is coercion.
Right.
Coercion is not leadership. And unfortunately, coercion is a lot of the way we lead. So my point coming back to, in office, out of office, people have their preferences. I get it. Water cooler talk. I totally get it. But where it's nowadays branching into coercion, like you will come to the office or I shall, whatever. I'm like, okay, whatever. You seem to me to be a shill for the real estate industry or, working for the real estate industry now because what do you care? I'm doing my job, but it's coercive.
Right.
And people do not respond to coercion.
Well, my dog Jeter, who's an ultra mini golden doodle, is at my feet right now, so he heard all that. So I next time I yell at him for sniffing his 16th straight bush on our walk, I'm going to take that in consideration. So there you go, Jeter. What's been fun for you that you're working on right now?
I am super excited to be working on a tech startup. And you kind of got to brace yourself for the elevator speech for the tech startup because it is a tech startup in post-quantum, peer-to-peer, cryptographic information exchange.
Wow. So is that the kind of the Web3 blockchain space?
Yeah. Merkle-DAG and the underpinnings of blockchain have something to do with it, but I'll unpack it for you for a minute because we just closed our pre-seed round. Cybersecurity, I think we could all agree, has been a failed experiment, right? I mean, the fact that cybersecurity is not working, it is objectively, demonstrably provable in all of our lives all the time. Okay, but it's one of these things where people say, okay, it's like rain. I may not like it, but it exists. Data privacy is a ship that sailed. Information is not secure. We do our best, So if you think about data and all of computing, it's based on a hub and spoke architecture. Like you and I think we're talking one-on-one right now, but we are not. We are talking through a podcast platform. There is an intermediary infrastructure through which we are talking. Everything works this way. Email works this way. Zoom works this way. Netflix works this way. Servers work this way. So when you have a hub and spoke architecture, you have a target. What if you took away the, and by the way, all of cybersecurity is around protecting that target. And I sit in these meetings where, you're trying to protect the target and metaphorically speaking, you've got razor ribbon, you've got a moat with alligators, you've got a wall, you got, all this kind of stuff around the target. And when there is a data breach, the CIO, whoever the chief risk guy or woman says, well, CEO, I don't know what to tell you because they told me I needed to have the yellow line around the target. I got the yellow line. And then they told me I needed the purple line. Then they told me I needed a red line. Then they told me I needed the green line. And then they told me I needed the gray line. So I got all the lines. So what do you want from my life? Right. And this is the dialogue that goes back and forth. Right. And then another cybersecurity product comes to the fore, and it's like, well, now I have the purple line.
Right.
And none of it works. So what if you took away the central server? You take away that big target that all exploits are built around. You fundamentally change the architecture. Well, this is not new. Napster did this, peer-to-peer information exchange. What Napster didn't do was to secure this peer-to-peer information exchange is often open. You can't control the peers on the network. You can't control the security of that information. You've taken away the central target. So now the information is harder to get to in a centralized way, right? It's harder to get to, but it's still out there.
Right.
What if you at now, as opposed to when Napster, I mean, I don't even know when Napster was around, maybe 2000 Napster.
Yeah.
Now, right? Now we have advanced cryptography and sophisticated key management. So one can imagine a world and information exchange products that are decentralized, no central server, where I am sending information to Jeff, where we each have keys, and the keys are managed in an advanced way. And the only people who are able to engage in that information exchange are Anna and Jeff. And there's no Microsoft in the middle. There's no, I don't know what you, web server in the middle. There's no Zoom in the middle. It's true peer-to-peer with cryptography on top of it. And quantum computing is coming, which is a whole other topic. We'll do a whole other podcast. But if you add to that quantum resilient cryptography, now you're cooking with gas. And so the startup that I'm working on that is getting funded is an information exchange product that does exactly that.
You've published at least 2 books, but I noticed that the Complete Software Project Manager book you did in 2016, and then your novel, Greedy Heart, was 2020. So you wanted to write your own novel. Why did you start with a kind of a nonfiction, how to informative book?
So that was by popular demand. I'd been working on the novel for alongside. So I had finished a gig as a contract CIO in a very difficult digital transformation situation. There were tons of personalities involved. I always say I don't get called when things are so good, right? You don't call the digital consultant because everything's running so smoothly. So I often walk into situations where if I had been there from the beginning, facilitating, it's not my decision to make, but the business might have come to some different decisions. So you're already inheriting some crappy decisions. And it was very difficult to run, and it was as successful as it could be. I mean, I was happy with the success, but along the way, I was managing a team, and a pretty extensive team, both interactive vendors. I mean, it was like 11 vendors, 5 time zones, 3 internal teams, 4 locations for the business. Like, it was just one of these massive things. And a lot of the young professionals that I was leading at the time were deer caught in the headlights. There was a project that was going sideways. People were shouting. There was recriminations. There was failures. It was all over the place. This was not my first rodeo. I was upset enough, but I had at least exposure to this before. And so I started to give them the life lessons that I had learned in project management. And, I'll give you an example. I taught them, I always would say, go in and diagnose. You've got 3 metaphors to diagnose any situation: a pile of snow, an IKEA desk, or a heart attack. And they would look at me like, what? Okay, a pile of snow, it sounds hard. Like, it's snowed overnight, your driveway is 200 feet long, you got to shovel the driveway. Sounds hard. Yeah, but you have a 100% chance of success, right? You get a shovel and you go out there, barring, throwing your back out, you are going to finish it. So you hated the idea, but it is not complicated and you are going to succeed. So don't be afraid of piles of snow. Like, this is like data migration. Don't be afraid. It's just a pile of snow. IKEA desk. You got the instructions. You got an Allen wrench. You say, this puppy is going to be together by 5 p.m. today. And at midnight the next day, you're still screwing it together, right? You had to go back to IKEA for a replacement thing. And they've got the little screw and the not so little screw and then the medium screw and then the not so medium screw, whatever. And you can't distinguish all these things. You put it together backwards once, whatever. So that's an IKEA desk. Again, seems hard, but you have a 100% chance of success, as opposed to a heart surgery where you got a person that comes in on the table, 6 underlying conditions that you don't know what they are, and you think this is going to be a standard, whatever, stent, put in a stent, and what you discover is a really fluid, complex situation with no guaranteed outcome. And Atul Gawande has a book called The Checklist Manifesto, and he does a version of this, which is, from the complicated to the complex. So I translated to my team in software by saying, like, look, you cannot make piles of snow into big deals, nor can you take something because it's just a heart surgery, right? It seems simple. The person is rolling in. It seems less intimidating, and it is not. So you have to do that. So I would teach them all this, and I was leaving. We were wrapping up the assignment, and they were like, so we all have to go on with our lives. But all that stuff that you were teaching us, do you have that written down anywhere?
Right.
And that was the genesis of the complete software project manager, which was
Nice.
my answering the call of some young, and I thought to myself, no, and half the time I don't remember what I said, right? Which is the other thing. Like, oh, no, Anna, we have to do this over here because remember you said blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, that's very good advice. I should write that down somewhere. They're like, yeah, that's your advice. So I did it for me and for them, and it still sells very well. It's taught at the university level. It is practical, hands-on project management. You're not going to get your PMP through this book.
Right.
Don't expect it. But it is in the trenches how to run a software project.
Okay. So talk about the novel. And did I hear you right earlier? You were actually started the novel before starting the complete
Yeah.
software project manager?
One's first novel is a really difficult endeavor because it's just you turns out it's very you can be an English major at Yale, you can do a lot of stuff. It's writing a novel is something that it's like going down a coal mine and you're alone and you've got to figure it out. You've got to figure out all the passages to get to the other side. So I had an idea that, of course, from the time I was a child that I wanted to write a novel, and I had various starts on it. My novel, Greedy Heart, is set around the 2008 financial crisis. It has two halves. Greed is the first half, and Heart is the second half. It's a romantic thriller. And I think of the main character as kind of like a female Gordon Gekko. So she is a person who starts out absolutely viciously motivated towards money and how one gets money, and the method doesn't matter. And then she, so it is her journey from effectively greed and corruption to redemption.
Running a business during that 07-08 recession, did that have any influence on the book, the character?
I think being in New York had of course it had influence. I think being in New York had influence. I think when New York is a place that's everything crammed together all the time. So you go on the subway or the bus and you are next to, I mean, almost literally Michael Bloomberg and then a person experiencing homelessness. So that kind of cheek by jowl, it's Dickensian, I mean, this is a Christmas carol. This is, the ghost of Christmas past, and he opens his cloak and there are the starving children underneath. I mean, that is the experience of New York. And the 2008 financial crash was so motivated by out of control greed.
Yeah.
And sort of for me culminated a period of time where business and industry have broken the social contract with the population.
Right.
And as a business owner, I was enraged is the word. I remember so all of us who run businesses, is narrating about, what if Ted in accounting has a knee surgery and your invoices are stuck? Well, the way one deals with that is, of course, you have a revolving line of credit. You have a line of credit where if something happens and your invoices aren't getting paid, whatever, you tap the line of credit. That's what it's for. Or normal businesses have these financial instruments to use to keep business operating. What happened was that there was a big crackdown after 2008. It was happening 2009, 2010, 2011. All of us got visits by our bankers, friendly neighborhood banker, and we all had our lines of credit slashed.
Right.
And I was objecting to this in a meeting I didn't cause a financial crisis. I paid my bills on time.
Right.
I've had a line of credit since 1998 with a farming bank in Chelsea, Michigan. Like, whoever you're concerned about, it ain't me.
Right.
Line of credit slashed in half. I'm objecting to this. And the banker says, ma'am, you need to consider yourself lucky because I just left the last guy in tears because we canceled his line of credit. And that was the everyday on the street reality for small business after 2008. And on Wall Street, bonuses were paid. They were paid on time. The banks got bailed out. And it hasn't changed. I mean, ever since then, the risk crackdown has fallen far more on small businesses than it has on big businesses. I mean, it's affected everybody, but we were not the bad actors. And so yes, I was enraged by the way runaway greed had impacted, just a woman living in the world trying to pay her employees and serve clients. It was regrettable isn't even the right word. It was obscene.
Yeah. And I love to help two groups of people with wisdom, with great leaders like yourself. That first group is that person coming out of college, undergraduate, trying to navigate their first job and starting their professional career. What advice would you give them after they graduate?
I've said it throughout our conversation. I would just have to say, Jeff, what a great goal and objective to have for these conversations. Number one, I would say take to heart that plans are just a draft. They're important. It's important to have a draft, but they're just a draft, and there's no penalty for changing the plan or changing your mind. The other thing that I would say is you must keep a positive outlook. Don't listen to the naysayers. For example, I have had friends through the years, I've lost clients, friends have lost jobs, all of these kinds of things. That happens. When you're looking for a job, it seems like no job exists. No job on the planet exists ever and will never exist ever again. The whole world is unemployed. Or no well-paying job exists, or no apartment exists, or whatever. Don't play the numbers. Don't listen to the numbers. Don't pay attention to the numbers. You are not a data reporter. What you are is a person looking for a job. And what you need is one job, or you need one apartment. That is what you need. You're telling me, I played this head trick on myself when I was looking for an apartment. Like, it was the height of the thing in 2005, no apartment bidding more, she'll never get an apartment. All this negative stuff that people are going to throw at you.
Right.
I would say to myself, I need one apartment in my price range. Are we saying in the entire city of New York, a city of 8.5 million people, that one apartment matching my list of priorities doesn't exist? That is crazy. And you are one person, one job, one boss, one project, whatever it is you're looking for. Of course it exists.
Yeah.
So don't listen to the baloney, because here's the other thing about the baloney and the negativity. It's contagious. It's like walking into a room of coughing people. You are going to come out coughing. There's no way you're not. So stay away from it. Tune it out. It'll affect you. You need one of whatever it is you're looking for. And do not listen to it, not only because it's inaccurate, because you only need one thing, but also because you will catch it.
No, I love that advice. And to go back to the planning, and I don't know if it's a Jewish proverb, but it says, here's how you make God laugh. Tell him or her about your plans, type thing. So there you go. The second group is that group of people that want to enhance their career by leading a group of people, where you're responsible on an org chart for, a team of people. So they're going from an individual contributor to now being responsible for a team. What advice, Anna, would you have for them as they begin their leadership journey?
I would say number one is you have to be honest with yourself about whether or not you're attuned to that role. And just a little sidebar, our idea of advancement, career advancement and salary advancement in business for forever has been, you go from being an individual contributor to being a team lead, to being the lead of a person who leads team leads, et cetera, et cetera. That is the path. Now people are beginning in different corporations, not every corporation, but people are beginning to question that path, because not everybody is temperamentally or tuned to be a leader. Again, doesn't mean you can't develop that muscle, right? But I think first of all, one has to say, is this something that I want to do and feel like I'm attuned to do because of who I am and where I'm going, and I embrace doing, I look forward to doing this? Or is this something that is being imposed on me by the culture, by the business culture? Because just so people can consider the alternative, many, many corporations are redoing their compensation, redoing their HR to say, I want to keep this, I'm going to use technical, world, this really advanced programmer who actually is an introvert and he wants to work alone. At best, he wants to mentor other people. So, but I want to keep him on my team. So I'm going to let him advance in compensation, advance in title, advance in every possible way. Because what I don't want is to force this person into a situation where he has to lead a team and now he's going to fail because he doesn't want to do it and he feels like he has to do it. So first of all, question, what is it that you want to do? And then number one characteristic of being good at leading teams is being good at leading yourself. People, there's this old I'm going to get it wrong, but this old proverb that goes something like, a person without anyone following them is not a leader. They're just a guy on a walk in a field, right? So people naturally gravitate towards good leaders. And that is, and I would say for that, get yourself a good executive coach. Because if you want to embark on this, you can get mentors, you can watch how people you admire do it. Every leader has his or her own style, and you have to be true to that style. But to do it, leading, so that's why I'll go back to the ninth grade classroom. Like, if you come out of a ninth grade classroom and you still have your crap together, you've succeeded. Because those ninth graders are going to do everything they possibly can to drive you insane. And it's the same with leading teams. Like, people are going to push your buttons and they are going to challenge you in ways that, it's like we were all back in sixth grade and someone goes, "You're ugly." This is what happens. You're going to lead good people and you're going to lead people with personal qualities that you would not prefer, and you're going to be in high pressure situations. So you've got to be in control of yourself. Because again, back to Fifi, the Chihuahua on the street, when you lose your crap, you've lost all credibility and you cannot get it back. So the level of perfection that's required to keep your act together is significant.
Anna, thank you so much for being on the Corporate Couch this morning. I'm so glad we were introduced, and you're fantastic. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeff. It's been a delight to be on.
Thought Anna was so fascinating. Just a great spirit, and I love her journey. But she went to Yale, and I didn't know what she did after Yale. There was a 2-year gap before she graduated Yale, and then she started her master's in journalism at Columbia. So obviously a smart person, but she taught school she was a ninth grade English teacher for that 2-year gap. And I'm thinking, very interesting. I'm sure your parents were like, okay, you went to Yale to teach ninth grade English. And everything she learned about running a meeting, she learned from running a ninth grade English class. And
oh yeah,
and she was a founder. She's doing a new startup, and she said it's the hardest job she ever had. So you gotta love that. But yeah, she just had so many different things, and it just was amazing to me that this woman that just loved old English literature, old being 1800s.
Chaucer.
Yeah, right.
Chaucer.
That and books like
Little House. Is that what you're?
Little House on Prairie. Yeah, those type books. North and South by John Jakes.
Yeah.
And other kind of period pieces, and then becomes a tech founder. Her company. She's the longest running woman-owned web and digital transformation agency in the U.S. And she's been around for 1996 to present.
She was doing the internet almost before there was an internet.
Yeah, the Wild West days of the internet.
I remember those Wild West days. I wasn't earning a living doing it, but I was around then.
And then she wasn't a coder. She wasn't a math major. She started in journalism and worked for ABC News. So told some crazy stories about the sexism in terms of what females experience, which had to be bad in the time period she was doing it.
Sent her to Bosnia to cover the war.
Right. She goes, we never went home for Thanksgiving. Like, she was hardcore journalist. And then she starts a tech company, but she said, I got some background in it because master's in journalism, you were doing a lot of things, coding in DOS, basically with DOS prompts. And you remember that. And none of our younger listeners will even know what the hell DOS is, but yeah, it's just really crazy. And she talked about, there weren't agencies that did websites. Now there's millions of them, but she was so early. She said it wasn't hard; it was just tedious, and we could learn. And being a journalist helped her because you had to go out and write a story on a nuclear power plant. It's not like, hey, I know nothing about a nuclear power or a nuclear power plant. The editor didn't care. Go write the story, and it needs to be done a week from today at 11 a.m. or whatever the deadline is.
Go figure it out.
Yeah. And even as a tech founder and running a successful company for 28 years, she says she hires journalists sometimes for positions because she knows they will get the job done and do the work it takes to know enough about the business to get the project done. So it's just incredible and just great energy. And I loved her story about, she gave some keynote address while she was knitting in the show that AI can't do everything, and people remembered her speech because not many people would be at a tech conference knitting on stage.
Knitting is one thing that they're never going to be able to replace with computers or AI.
Exactly.
Right.
What did you get out of Anna's conversation, Joe?
The one thing that struck me that's kind of interesting that I'm going to pull out is when she was talking about first going to Yale, and the experience that she had as a college freshman paralleled very closely to my experience as a college freshman. When I was in high school, I was a musician, and I was arguably the best or one of the best musicians in all our high school. When I went to college and I was a freshman, I discovered that everybody else who was a music major was the best musician in their high school. And I was nobody. I was nothing then. And I kind of had come to the conclusion that is probably true of a lot of musicians and probably a lot of athletes also. That is that a lot of times somebody is the high school quarterback and they're dating the homecoming queen or the prom queen or cheerleader squad or something like that. And then they go to be a freshman in college and find out everybody was the best quarterback in high school and everybody was dating the homecoming queen. And it would be a very humbling experience. And then Anna comes along and she had that exact same experience as an English major. That she thought, well, I can write and I love reading all this stuff, and gets thrown into a Yale, a very high-end college, obviously. But everybody there was the best English person in their high school.
Right.
And it made me realize, it gave me the perspective to realize that that's probably an experience that a lot of people have. I've had this opinion for a long time, and I wouldn't want to make it a rule, but it's certainly something that people need to consider. That I believe that there's a lot of value in taking a year off between being a senior in high school and being a freshman in college. And the reason for that is because being a freshman in college is not just year 13. It isn't just a continuation of high school. And a lot of high school 18-year-olds believe that's going to be I did, that was going to be the case. I just thought that it's just a continuation, just more high school. And boy, it isn't. And if you get a year off in between there and opportunity to experience other things, you might be more prepared there. A few weeks ago, you had the popular, inimitable Seth Godin as your guest on the Corporate Couch. And one of the things he said was that if you're going to make a $250,000 decision, that is going to high school, that decision shouldn't be made by an 18-year-old.
Yeah, totally. I know.
And I totally agree with that. I think we're doing it all wrong, and we need to rethink that.
Yeah, well, I think college is definitely going to evolve, and it has to. It's got to be. It's a system that is somewhat archaic, honestly. Anyhow, what leadership advice would you like to give our listening audience today, Joe?
Today we're going to go to that famous philosopher named Tina Fey. Tina one time said this: if we're going to pay this much for crab, it better sing and dance and introduce us to the Little Mermaid.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Corporate Couch. If you enjoy the podcast, I would love for you to take 2 minutes out of your day to rate us 5 stars and write a review. Please join me next week to learn from another great leader sharing their professional journey and insights.